Cool. So yeah, the background from my end is like I kind of said, back in 2006, I came across. I was actually very stressed out about the George Bush presidency in the U.S., and that largely was a factor of the vote splitting that happened with the Green Party candidate Ralph Nader and the Democrat Al Gore. And so I was sort of looking for solutions for that. And I remembered reading how some guy supposedly proved there's no perfect voting method. That would have been Arrow's theorem, although that was really about ranked voting methods and it didn't really apply to rated or scored voting methods. So I came across this website of a Princeton math PhD named Warren Smith, who had basically done some research and some computer modeling that said it would be better if we just scored people on a scale like 0 to 9, 0 to 99, 0 to 5, something like that. And people could, indicate strong opposition or support for people. And there are all different kind of ways you can do the scale, but we spent many years advocating for this. And the group that I ended up co-founding here in the US called the Center for Election Science, they went ahead and ran with the simplified form of score voting called approval voting. So essentially it's a 0 or a 1. You either vote or don't vote for every candidate. And after these many years I've been involved in this research here, I just the other day for the first time heard this idea that Latvia uses a form of score voting. And I didn't really believe it at first because we've heard this kind of thing before. And it turns out, oh, that's not actually what it is. It's some kind of variation. It's not like you can only cast a total of so many score points or something like this. And so doing the research and finding these ballots, pictures of them online that people had filled out, I was able to confirm that, yes, it really is essentially a 3-tiered score voting where you can say for or against or neutral. And then basically what's that?
I would like to apologize first because when you were writing to me, my arm's broken now, and I was ridiculously. I was taking tons of painkillers when you wrote to me the first time.
Oh,
so I was a mess.
I'm so sorry.
I managed to. Yeah, I went through Ukraine. Everything's fine. Then I decided to visit Netherlands and see my friend for a bit. Then we go out on the beach and I just fell down and snap. So.
That's crazy. Where in the Netherlands were you?
In Rotterdam and The Hague.
Okay. Yeah. My wife's sister lives in The Hague. She married a Dutch guy. So we'll be there this summer to visit. Yeah, great country. I love the cycling culture.
Yeah, that is why I was so slow to understand what you really meant by this scoring system. Because like you said, in Latvia, we you vote for the party, and then on the party list that you're voting for, you can make those amends. You can either push someone up or push people down.
Yeah.
Leave it neutral.
Yeah, which seems like all in all a really good system because you're still getting the proportionality and you're getting a good choice of different parties, but then within the party you have a lot of control over, it's easy to kick out a bad politician because you can actually score them individually. I know in like the Netherlands, the way they do it is that I think you vote for a specific candidate. And so that sort of is your vote for the party, but you can only vote for one. So you can't say that you like several of them or vote against anyone. And then the votes that a candidate gets doesn't necessarily determine the party order. It can only override the internal party list order if they get enough votes. It has to be like some very high number, like 25% or something like this. And so what you have in Latvia seems to actually give so much like total control to the voters. But I'd love to hear more about the thing that was striking to me, and the thing I'd like to drill into with you a bit is our sense from the research we've done would be that, a country that would use score voting would be almost sort of like this utopia because it's just so much better than plurality voting.
Well, I'll tell you about how Latvian politicians have managed to abuse the system as well.
Yes. And I think I think the thing I'm trying to understand here is sort of the ways that it works, but also to what extent the issues that, Latvia has there are things that are getting better, but they're just kind of a holdover from things that happened decades ago that can't just, fix themselves overnight. It seems like score voting is working actually really well. And there's also the whole issue of some people might say that it's actually good to some extent, to have elites determining these things because they know things better than the average voter does. And so is it almost like too much democracy where voters have, people can go high in the list because of being very photogenic or being good speakers or being very charismatic, kind of like how we get Donald Trump, right? He's charismatic, even though he's policy-wise is very, very worrisome. So I'd love to hear all about that in your experience and just how you see it holistically. So please tell me anything you'd like to.
Okay, so first off, how the system works is that we have party lists.
Yep.
And who goes in which position on the list is determined by the party leaders. So you run the party, and your top guy is like number 1, and then your like least likely, least popular person that is going to get in is like 30, because you can have a maximum of, I guess, in regional elections 30 people, and then the big one's like 60 people on the list. And you vote when you just, if you throw in a blank ballot, you leave the list, kind of, you vote for the party gets a vote, but the list isn't changed. So what happens is that if, say, of our 100, I'll just use abstract numbers here, we have 100 people in our parliament, as we actually do.
Yep.
And say a party gets, first of all, you count the party, the party votes. You just vote. You don't look at the pluses and minuses. You just determine the party, how much percentage does each party get. So technically, if a party gets 20%, they get 20 seats. And so from those 20 seats, here comes the next step. So then, if you presume that this is where the pluses and minuses come in, because technically, if party has 20 seats, then first 20 people on that list would get elected. But then you count the pluses and minuses, because what people do is that with these pluses and minuses, they move people around in those places. Basically, you vote for this party for them to get a seat, but you can just strike out the people that you don't want to get elected if they get a seat, and you can add and plus how many people you like. If you want to basically, want to kind of, move some candidate upwards on the list. Say your party has 20 seats, but you like the guy who's like 21st. Then you would basically cross out someone whom you don't like in the top 20, and you would just add a plus, and then he would just jump up in your list. And if he would have got enough pluses, I don't know the extreme specifics on this, but basically what those pluses and minuses do is that they move around this. But you can also vote for, you can also basically give minuses to everyone on this, on the kind of the ballot.
Right, which would be pointless, but you could do it.
No, it isn't pointless.
How's that?
Because that means that the party, that still counts as a vote for, that counts as a vote for the party in general. That means that adds to the ballots, to the votes the party itself gets. But you've basically put down everyone, stating that in case what you would like to see is that you want to see this party get elected, but none of these specific guys get elected. Basically, because we have regions. We have just 5 regions in Latvia. You have many more in states. But basically, if you, for example, because in our parliament elections, I used to live in Latgale, but I was registered in Riga, and a lot of and I like the party guy. I like the people who were running from Riga to get in our parliament from a party that I voted for, but I didn't like anyone from the region that I actually had to cast the vote in. So I would go to that region, give them my vote, that would count in total, but I don't like these specific guys running in my district, so I can just cross them all out.
Are you saying that you actually consolidate the different region lists for a given party, but okay, so that could actually affect the list in the sense that the points,
because we're a small country,
so the points count for the entire list, not just for your part of the list, even though you can only vote on the candidates in your region, right? So you could actually move the candidates in your region further down the total list for your party.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, that is really interesting.
Look, I'm sorry if I'm bad at explaining this.
No. I mean, that makes sense. I didn't know that.
I'm a historian and a journalist. I'm not really good at. I'm not a lawyer, so just say.
Yeah.
But this has led to some weird cases, because this is the whole system. And then this works also in municipal elections. And that's also how we elect people to Euro Parliament. We apply this whole voting system to all of our elections, not just the Parliament ones.
Yeah.
The thing is,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just gonna explain how this has been abused and why we're actually applying some modifications to the current system. See, in our past parliamentary elections, the leader of one of our parties, the Unity Party, not the Harmony Party, the one that
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah,
currently
yeah,
in
yeah.
parliament.
Yep, yep.
She was leader of the party at the time, and she was number one on the list. But people gave her so many minuses that she was pushed out of people. Like your number one person that is supposed to be the party leader who's running for prime minister, she, because of the minuses, was pushed out. And although the party got like 17 places in our parliament, she was pushed to be the 18th. So according to our law, she wouldn't be elected.
Wow.
What happened was, though, that the guy who ended up being the 17th decided, just after being elected, to cancel his mandate and just move to a job in Hong Kong for sudden, no unknown reasons, so that the party leader would get in. And we treated that as it isn't technically illegal, but then A, why did you run? And two, it was really, really shady. So now, again, I looked at this. So now now they're shifting around this part that you can't, look, I can't really explain exactly what, but they're shifting around the system a bit so that this specific case can't repeat, so that you can't abuse the system this way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't really find exactly what they're changing, but they're trying to, they made some sort of a little thing that would basically cut this abuse off. This is one of the things. And in a lot of cases, one thing that a lot of people here actually want is that they want to move to a bit more weirder system where like approximately 70% of the candidates would be elected through this party list and this scored voting system. But they also would like to introduce something called individual districts where you could vote for people who are like not in parties, but still want to run.
Okay, so that's like the MMP system used in Germany and New Zealand, where
but that's in debate tonight. I'm not sure if that'll pass.
Yeah.
Our system is interesting because also what happens is that we have a 5% barrier of entry.
Yep.
And what happens is that those votes that are given for parties in total, for all the parties that, well, basically there's a party that got 4% of the vote, party that got 2% of the vote. It basically gathers up some percentage, and all those votes that are given by the parties that didn't make it to the parliament, those seats are spread proportionally among the parties who got elected into the parliament.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
So
right.
that's
right.
what we do here.
Right. And you're using like Saint Leg, however you pronounce it, apportionment system there. It sounds like so.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, one thing that we also have, I think, that helps this system is because we intentionally chose this method because as we used to be in the Soviet Union, we didn't. They had secret ballots only on paper in the Soviet Union. It was like the nice man from the KGB would stare at you if you would ask to go into the cabin and not just throw your ballot in for Mr. whomever was appointed.
Yeah.
So I don't really know why we picked this voting system, but we wanted to pick something that would give as much democracy as possible into all of this mix. We intentionally chose as much there. However, our issues are basically created because, well, for one, by European standards, we are center-right country, and that's because pro-Putin part. First of all, it goes back to history. We have our Russian minorities, some of whom weren't given citizenship, like a large population of them in the 90s, because in the 90s our government was really corrupt, and they explained this that, oh no, these guys are basically, they're going to vote. They voted against the Latvian independence, and we wanted to present ourselves as a continuation. It was a long story, but basically they managed to, in the 90s, our government managed to fail integration completely. Like they screwed up integration policy and you know, all this kind of, they caused a lot of issues that we're dealing today with our Russian.
With regarding like things like the children citizenship thing of.
Yes. So now it's fixed because currently we've changed that so that previously, if like right now you're a citizen, if like anyone of your, basically we fixed this right now, everyone born in Latvia is a citizen, but the thing that caused issues is that caused the divide in our government. So those Russians who got Latvian citizenship through naturalization process, which is a hard process, they basically, obviously they're living constantly in Russia's informational sphere, and they're basically pro-Putin parties. However, they always portrayed themselves as they were also very nostalgic for the Soviet Union, which means that in Baltic states, all the pro-Russian, pro-Putin parties present themselves as left-wing parties. Left-wing here basically means pro-Russian and pro-Putin, which now is causing a lot of issues for actual left-wing parties who try to run, because they also have to prove not only their progressive ideas, but the fact that they're also not funded by Russia, because a lot of people who are not inclined, they also, instantly presume that everyone who's on the left is super pro-Putin. Which is why when Donald Trump got elected in the States, your average grandma in Latvia was sitting and very confused, because he was like, but he's right-wing. So why is he pro-Putin? And it was like huge mess. And these people, they were also quite much against all this system, because one of the issues was that for a country like ours, this method of voting is a bit complex. You have to explain it to people. And these guys, one of their legit arguments was that for people who have just gained citizenship and don't know Latvian on a very great level, they can hold a conversation, but they're not qualified enough in legalese or something, it might be extremely difficult for them to understand this, and it's easy for them to make mistakes. So that's a criticism on the democracy part, that if all of your papers are in English, and if you're an American citizen whose English probably isn't that good, then you might have issues, because that has been done in the past. However, I think that can be just done with more translation. And again, yeah, you have to kind of figure out some arguments about how to limit kind of this whole situation with this system. But yeah, I'm okay with this.
Yeah, well,
I hope I've been useful, because I really don't know exactly precise terms of everything.
Yeah, no, that's a really good background. I mean, I think we thought a lot about the right sort of interface for score voting. Like, imagine you had rather than the whole idea of crossing out for a negative or a plus sign, you could just have 2 plus signs, and you could be allowed to fill out neither of them or one or both. And that would still give you the same scale range of, 3 different scales, but it would be it'd be a little harder to get confused by or something. You can, if you want to boost somebody, you can boost them once or twice. Although in that case, the default, if you did nothing, would be the minimum value as opposed to the middle value. So that's actually, like, if we talk about, for instance, using like a 0 to 5 scale, and if you leave it blank, you could either treat that as not affecting the average, or you could treat it as an explicit 0. And there are debates about which is the better way to do it and how that might affect unknown candidates. But a thing that comes to mind for me as looking at this scale you have, where if you leave it alone, you're essentially giving somebody the middle value, right? It's not voting against them, but it's also not voting for them. So I guess I'm curious, are there cases where do you feel that if somebody is sort of known well, but they're maybe polarizing, some people really like them, some people dislike them, they could get a lot of strike throughs, but some people who are maybe just not that well known maybe get a benefit, because maybe a lot of people don't plus them, but they also don't strike them. So they get a little bit of a boost that could help newcomers or kind of underdogs that aren't well known yet. Do you feel that happens, or do you think that most people, just to be safe, kind of strike through the people that they have sort of never heard of?
Well, this is interesting, because the strike through and the plus cancels each other out. This is when you count them.
Oh, sure, of course, yeah.
But normally, a lot of people basically don't really kind of add those things. Basically, if you just leave everything blank, then you trust the party. Basically you give a vote for the party, and you just leave the list of people who are to be elected kind of unchanged.
I don't mean leaving the ballot blank. I do want to dive more into that with you, but I mean, say there, you're going down the list of candidates.
No. Our ballots work differently, because you're getting a bunch of papers, and each party has like their own list. So you basically pick one list, and then like all the parties and all the candidates are not on a single list. They are on separate pieces of paper.
Oh, of course. Yes. No, I understand that. So let's say your unity party, you go down your list, you say, I like this guy plus, I dislike this person, strike. This person is sort of mediocre, so I'm just not going to plus or strike them. I'm just going to leave them blank. Right.
Yeah, but those people are usually they don't get a massive boost, because people who are mostly polarizing, being number one on the list is a clear advantage, because that's how your party wants to get elected. So these people are usually higher up, and it's the rare case when someone who's super high doesn't get elected. But normally, yeah, because of we haven't really faced this issue that someone, someone who would be mediocre would get a boost because they would go there, because normally our elections are like, currently we're run by a coalition of 5 parties and we have
Oh
3
yeah.
more opposition parties. Usually in Latvia, no single party has gotten such a majority where this would actually come into play and matter. So
Well, what
I'm
do you mean it
really,
wouldn't matter? I mean, like what I'm saying here is that if you, regardless, let's just say, I mean, I know Harmony Party was the sort of the plurality. They got
Mhm.
the most votes of any single party, but regardless of that, I'm just saying that if you can imagine that, like imagine it was a 0 to 2 scale. So you could do 0, 1, or 2. And let's just say the default, if you do nothing, is
Mhm.
0. What that would mean is that being relatively unknown would really, really hurt you because you'd get the minimum score. Whereas with the system you have, if a lot of people don't know enough about you to even plus or strike you, you do fairly well, because at least you get, like, it's kind of like getting 1 point on a 0 to 2 scale. You get kind of the middle score. And so I guess what I'm asking is, like, do
Yeah.
you see a lot of cases where, in general, do you think people, when they come across a candidate that they don't really know much about, do they tend to just say, I'm going to strike you out to be on the safe side because I'm going to vote against you because I don't know much about you?
No,
Or
no,
would they,
no, no. The-
or do they just kind of say, yeah, I mean, is it common for people to use all 3 scales on their ballot? Like,
yeah.
you find yourself saying, okay, like
Yeah.
you, don't like you, I'm ambivalent about you, I'm just not going to.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's the most common thing, because, well, you'll be surprised how many people actually tend to just use the option of striking everyone out and just throwing the ballot in. That's a bizarre option that a lot of people here use. Um, but yeah, a lot of people just leave things blank because it's kind of weird, because giving those pluses and minuses, that's extra work. So you
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
so and in total, basically most people just basically they really just push someone up if they really like them, or give a minus if they really dislike them. The empty option gets used a lot.
Okay, that's actually really fascinating to know. So then I guess the what I want to get into a little bit here is, you know, well, you mentioned something where you said if you leave your entire ballot blank, you're sort of delegating to the party, and I don't know what that means. I mean, how would it
Oh,
affect the outcome?
oh,
I
it
mean,
it affects
obviously, you're giving the party their share of the seats if you do that, but
yes.
but that doesn't affect the list in any way, does it? The actual
No,
order of that list?
no, it doesn't affect the order
Okay,
in any way.
got it, got it. Okay,
You
so
just
the only time that, as I understand it, the only way the party's predetermined list matters is that it's the order you see them in on the ballot, so it can help people they like better, by giving them, the higher you are on the ballot, the sort of the
Mhm.
more advantageous that is for you. And then B, as I understand it, if 2 candidates were to get an exact tie, then you just put them in the order that they appeared on the ballot relative to each other. So if
Yes.
yeah, okay, so that's sort of a tiebreaker for people as well. But other than that, it pretty much is in the hands of the voters, I guess. So um, do you feel that, generally speaking, I mean, I'm trying to get a better sense of understanding
Mhm.
of where, to what it, because when you would look at this system and compare it to like the US or many other countries, you would say that on paper, this looks like an extremely good voting method that's really good at sort of getting rid of bad incumbents, or fighting corruption, and yet Latvia still has some challenges. And so, to what extent do you feel that's not really a problem of the voting method? It's just these other issues that are happening. And do you feel that in general the public perceives this to be a voting method where it really does put them in control, and it feels very expressive? Like I have a lot of control as a voter to push candidates down who I think are bad, and to boost people who I think are inspiring, or a breath of fresh air to the process. Like, is there a general view that, like, yes, we have a good voting system here? Because I think in America, it's very much the case that, well, while most people don't know a lot about alternative voting methods, or they're not thinking about it, there's a strong sense that something is, does feel bad or broken, and we have this 2-party system, and a lot of people would like to have a feeling of greater choice, and they don't really know why they don't have it. So would you say in Latvia with this system, it does feel like it's generally seen by the public as like a good, very democratic system? Or what is the general sentiment about it?
Well, we haven't had any real, like, voting system is the one thing that we really haven't had any massive debates or arguments for. That's the one thing that we're actually quite happy about, because
Okay.
as far as I know, because I haven't seen anyone except that one time which are going to make minor changes in 2026. Except that thing, no one really has complained about the voting system. Some people wanted to do the kind of partially district one, but that went nowhere. And also, I think there are other problems with that people are complaining more about, because we're a parliamentary republic, and this is why we are very careful about whom we elect in the parliament, because after that, the parliament can then make their coalitions, and then they kind of decide among themselves who's going to be the president and who's going to be the prime minister, and we don't elect them directly. So everything happens that we elect the parliament, and then parliament further on does things. And this has led to issues where we sometimes complain about the fact that we, for example, even though president in Latvia is only serves a representative function with very few political like real power functions, a lot of people state that we should probably, we have had cases where the people are left really disappointed about who gets elected our president. Well, this has happened quite a lot of times, because electing our parliamentaries, that's okay. What they do with all the power invested in them, now that has caused a bunch of issues, because we also have this tendency over here, and it's not just Latvia, it's like in Lithuania and Estonia too, because at least for a long while we didn't have this kind of established political parties and everything. So in occasions, some parties would just dismantle themselves during their stay in the parliament. And once you are elected in the parliament, you can leave the party that you're in and you still stay elected. That's the thing. And people are angry about this because in the 90s, again, we had like, oh, I got elected from this party, but I don't like them anymore, so I'm just going to switch my allegiance to that party, but I'm still elected because of the pluses and minuses. And people were really angry because they said, hey, we not only voted for you, we also voted for the party that you represent, and you can't just betray us by switching sides.
Right.
And then we had a lot of issues with the fact that the politicians were basically, guys who got elected because they ran a huge campaign, and then they failed their promises. And then, they basically scrambled other guys who had failed stuff. And now and then we would get this, some savior, basically our miniature version of Trump coming in and promising mountains of gold and whatever. And he would just elect, and the party would just wash out and disappear. We are more concerned about corruption and what the parliamentaries do, because of other issues which we feel are threatening our democracy and everything. But the election system of the parliament itself, yeah, that's the one thing that I actually haven't heard any complaints about, because it's just a thing and no one really is arguing about is that good or not, or that's kind of, I think we have it pretty well, because we have all those other issues which cause us problems, and we really are more concerned about those. Election system is definitely, I don't really think that how we elect our parliament isn't really to blame for our democracy issues.
Yeah. So when it comes to voting for the president, there's the president is the prime minister, and the president is largely ceremonial. But is it a direct vote for president, or does parliament elect them somehow?
Parliament elects them.
And is that like a plurality voting thing, or is it just sort of some sort of negotiation that happens and they
prime minister and which party gets which offices? Because Minister of Defense, Minister of Education, parties come together, and then they make a coalition, basically trading the things. It's like, okay, I want to be like this, like Vienotība, our Unity Party came and said, okay, we want the prime minister, but because basically there's trading about which party gets which seats in the parliament, basically which party gets which minister offices. Then they kind of make deals among themselves. And then they present all their list, like, hey, this is the new government. This guy's going to be the prime minister, and this guy's going to be this minister. They present the whole list, and then the parliament votes on the list. This is interesting, because if the parliament passes, then everything's fine. If this vote on the whole list together fails, then you have to have another election. Then the election results are just canceled. Another thing happens is that if our president can't veto laws. What our president can do, it's one of his functions. By the way, president is elected in elections in the parliament, voting, not trading, voting. And the only power that president actually has is that if the president doesn't like a law presented by our parliament, he can send it back to be rewritten. He can do it, like, if he does it twice, it's fine. If he does it the third time, then that automatically triggers a referendum and it's either and then either there's a new election and all the parliament gets like dismantled, or the president must go and the new president is elected. And what happened was that one of our presidents triggered this, Valdis Zatlers, in 2011, and basically he won. So the parliament at that point, who were seen as very corrupt, were thrown out, and the new one was elected. But the next parliament, which also consisted of a lot of the same parties, didn't re-elect that president, even though they knew he would be super popular, popular as a figure. Now the thing is that although so this is why, because our politicians are afraid that if they elect a really popular president, like someone that people actually love, who serves basically the same role as vice president does in the United States, then he might, like, and if they pass something that the president and the people don't like, then he might just get them all fired. So this is why they have elected people which are just bizarre. Like our newest one, Egils Levits, is a very mild-mannered man, and kind of, at least he knows English. But we've had presidents which are basically who didn't do anything at all. Like,
he was born in America, wasn't he?
This guy, he was a
Vermont or something.
I think I don't know. I think our prime minister wasn't born in Latvia. And again, it's because if anyone in your family was a citizen in the interwar Latvia, then you automatically get a citizenship by blood, which has also caused another issue which is creeping up on us, because population in Latvia is dwindling because we have a demographical crisis here. However, the Latvian diaspora, because of all of our dual citizenship laws, is actually expanding, and they have voting rights. And those are people who are, on the one hand, Latvian citizens with the right to vote. On the other hand, they might also not be able to speak Latvian, nor they could might have never even visited Latvia. And the amount, and the proportion between them and people who live in Latvia is like so weird that diaspora has a lot of impact in our elections. And we're trying to solve this by the fact that maybe you'll get to vote if you've at least been to Latvia in the past few years. But then again, we have people who work in the embassies. So it's a bit of a mess, because again, in the 90s, our citizenship laws and our integration laws were totally screwed by our, at that point, extremely corrupt government. And now we're in a mess where our diaspora has a disproportional amount of votes, because in Latvia, the voting activity among people who go to, the participation rate is about 47%. That was the last election. 47% of eligible people went to vote. Meanwhile, and Latvia has about 2 million people living in it. Meanwhile, in the million or so Latvians that can vote abroad, the participation rate was over 80%. So you can imagine how that can cause shifts, where basically if you live abroad, you're more likely to go to elections, and there's so many of these people who live abroad that also causes issues, because as they don't know the political situation, that they don't follow it that closely, they tend to elect more populistic people who might not be very well loved over here. And then the Russian stuff happens in. Those are all things completely unrelated to our election system, but I just want to explain all this crazy mess that we're trying to deal with to kind of show to you that it's not the election system at fault here. It's literally digging through the mess in the 90s.
In some sense, it feels like, you might say that the voting procedure itself is actually doing pretty well, that it's sort of holding up a good democracy in spite of all of these other factors. So that actually is really impressive. So we only have about 5 minutes left here, so I want to touch on just a few things real quick here. So one person who responded to me on Twitter, a resident of Latvia, said that the parliament, I guess, is it Saeima elections, Saeima, were held in 1922, 1925, 1928, and 1931. From 1934 to 1940, there was a dictatorship. From 1940 to 1991, Soviet and Nazi occupations. And the next free elections happened in 1993 after the fall of the Soviet Union. Do you understand when this system of scoring was actually first instituted?
Oh boy, I really can't tell you about the early elections, because at that point I have to go into a bit of history. See, what happens is that our dictatorship, which was authoritarian regime by Kārlis Ulmanis, see, that dude was also one of our founding fathers. It was kind of like George Washington taking over. And he was extremely popular during that time, and he's still extremely popular now because our voting system before that was a mess. We didn't have any percentage barriers at all, and you just voted for lists in total. We didn't have this system in the interwar period, and it was a complete
There's too much
mess.
fragmentation, too many small parties.
Yes, and we didn't have this thing. So the guy basically wanted to, and at that point, Lithuania and Estonia had their thing going on, but let me tell you, our authoritarian leader, he didn't kill anyone, and what he wanted to do is basically get rid of the fragmentation stuff, and maybe deal with the German threat, because he wasn't although he was authoritarian, he wasn't a fan of the Germans. Let me tell you that he systematically opposed Baltic Germans a lot, which is interesting. But I think it was in the 90s. I really think it was in the 90s because we really didn't want to repeat all this mess why our dictatorship came into place in the first place, because in the early interwar period, yeah, like I said, no percentage barrier, and I think it was first past the post in like smaller districts too, or something like that. Because yeah, that was a huge mess. That being a huge mess was one of the reasons why actually we got this authoritarian regime in the interwar period from the 1933, which, by the way, today is, I think he did it on the 15th of May, if I'm not mistaken. Wait a minute. Let me check. I think it's either. Oh yeah, hey, we're talking on the anniversary of him taking power. It's kind of from in 1934, 15th of May. He kind of did the coup d'état. So we're talking on the anniversary of that, for me at least.
Wow. Okay.
Well, that is not a celebrated date today in Latvia, mind you.
Right. That makes sense.
But although he himself is very much loved, because like I said, he's basically our George Washington. He's also, like, his coup part is not viewed as nicely, although people remember it's a complex situation. Listen to the eastern border and find out. I speak about it there.
Yeah. So I have 2 minutes here with you, and
Sure.
One last question would be,
Mhm.
is there a way to see publicly the results of the party list part of the election? So can I see the totals of all the votes and then the order that it generated for any given party? Is that published, or is it sort of per party,
No.
whether they want to publish that?
Oh no, it's absolutely published. You can see that, and you can also see the total of pluses and minuses each candidate gets before they cancel out too.
That if you could link me to that, I would love to put that in the notes, and maybe I can put this discussion on YouTube or something like that, and then just link to that, so that the election nerds like myself, we would love to pore over that.
Just go to the cvk.lv. That's cvk.lv, our Central Election Committee. I am not sure if they have an English version, but you could run them through Google Translate. That would be good enough.
Okay.
And they probably have this data, because they have to hold this data for everything. They also hold data about all the referendums and everything. And this cvk.lv, that thing. Oh no, they have an English version. Whoa.
Okay. Well, we're gonna get cut off shortly, but I'm gonna follow up with that, and I'll get that URL.
I'm messaging you the link. It should be somewhere here on this homepage. This is our Central Election Committee.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been great, and this is really impressive. I feel like I've learned so much more about Latvia here. So yeah, it seems like there's a bright future ahead here. So thanks for your story. Good day to you.
Great. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.